I want to play my Gibson Custom 1963 SG Special VOS. We're going to find out if this thing's any good. And this video isn't like other videos out there, you know, where they talk for like 20-25 minutes and then only play the guitar for a minute and a half. We're going to play the heck out of this thing, but we're still going to talk. We're also going to be doing some quick comparisons. But enough talking, let's get after it. So you can't really do a review on YouTube unless you talk about the specs, right? I'm going to try and do that for you quickly here, and then we will get to 5 more sound samples. And in order to do that, I have to take a tiny bit of time, I'm sorry, to explain this is a VOS finish. In the past, Gibson has used VOS as vintage old stock, vintage original stock, vintage original spec, which I believe is an automotive copyright now, vintage original specification, which they hold the copyright for. But currently it is used as the finish type for the body and the actual hardware as vintage original sheen. It's to separate it from Murphy Lab. So whenever I say VOS or vintage original sheen, I understand Gibson holds the copyright for vintage original specification, and that's what it was before like 2019, but I'm sorry. So we have a vintage original sheen gloss nitrocellulose finish. It's a little bit thinner than the typical Gibson USA, and that is on a single piece mahogany body. We have a mahogany neck that has the C-shaped original or vintage slim taper neck, which is a little different than the traditional slim taper by like millimeters. We also have a bound rosewood fretboard with the dot inlays. On the front of the headstock is where you're going to see the inlaid cellulose nitrate Gibson logo. We're also not going to see anything else because it's an SG Special. On the back of the headstock is where you're going to find the 3-on-a-plate Kluson Vintage Deluxe tuners. They are also vintage sizing, so that means if you wanted to, for some reason, replace these with more modern tuners like locking tuners, you'd actually have to remount the holes to make them wider. We have 2 volume and 2 tone. These are CTS audio taper potentiometers. They're still Gibson branded like most of them are. They also have the Black Beauty capacitors. Can't forget a 3-way toggle switch. And that controls the custom P90 pickups. The last thing we want to take a look at here is the bridge. So we have a lightning bar here with, again, the VOS finish on the hardware here. That's enough about the specs. Here's 5 more sound samples. So now that we've heard those 5 extra sound samples, I like to say the same thing in every one of these videos, and that's I'm doing the next part to appease the internet. I'm trying to prevent tears from forming themselves into comments. It is beneficial. We are going to play, for you in the back there, all 3 pickup positions in clean. But I've always been the kind of guy that likes to hear how the pickups actually react to a little bit of light drive, so here's that. Remember when I was talking about the potentiometers? Let's wiggle some knobs here, and we'll see how the potentiometers and the capacitors fare with wiggling. So now let's get into some quick comparisons. So basically all of these comparisons here, we're going to do just a simple 3 pickup position comparison, so you can just quickly hear some of the sound differences here. But if you are interested, I do have a comparison video between both of these where I go a little more in depth, and I also have a video that actually explains the difference between both of these, like so spec wise and like, you know, hardware and electronic wise. But Gibson 1963 SG Special VOS versus the Gibson USA Ebony SG Special. Next up, comparison-wise, I figured we'd just grab a Les Paul that has P90s in it. So we'll do 1963 SG Special VOS versus the 1956 Les Paul Goldtop VOS. 3-pickup comparison. And finally, for the last comparison here, I figured, you know what, we should do an SG with humbuckers here. Although technically we'll say Les Paul rather than SG here for the year that it's modeled after. So we'll do the 1963 SG Special VOS versus the 1961 Les Paul Standard, which is an SG, VOS as well. 3-pickup position comparison. Alright, so that's it for all of the different sound samples and all the different comparisons and the knob wiggling, which knobs are down here. So throughout the video, I've given you the opportunity to, like, you know, decide for yourself whether or not you think this sounds like it's a good guitar, right? Albeit it's in my hands, not yours, with my choice of what to play through, and what settings to use. So there's definitely some caveats there, right, to watching videos on YouTube. So when it comes to guitar, it's 10% sound, 90% feel. Okay, 85%, maybe 80%, because you've got to have that extra 5 or 10% where you feel like a cool person when you're playing the guitar, you know what I mean? But I want to give you my opinion here on this guitar, feel-wise, and a few other things. So yes, I think this is a good guitar. I think good is a little low on the totem pole on what this actually is. This is a phenomenal guitar. When it comes to feel, And I don't know if this is going to translate properly. So when I'm playing this, I'll grab a pick. I always wanted to do that whole Marty McFly thing. But I mean, I don't have a reflective pick, but you know what I mean? You hold it up and then there's like the zoom right in on the pick holding up. But when I'm playing this, so I did this before with some other guitars, but I'd like to do it with this. So in comparison to the SG Special, the Gibson USA SG Special, when I play this and then play that one, I feel a ton of resonance in that one in my body when I'm playing. So when I'm playing it, I feel it more here and a little less in the hands, which is generally what you feel, to be honest, when you're playing like a satin nitro guitar, right? You usually feel like a ton of resonance, and for those they throw, in order to up the presence there, or that, you know, top end feel, they throw a maple neck on it because that has a little bit of snap feel to it. With this one here, it's just a little more balanced. So it feels deep, but there's enough of that balance of presence feel that it's not like a guitar that you're feeling all in your body. There's a good balance between what you're feeling in your body and your hands. I'd also like to take this time to say that we as guitar players, especially me, we're a little on the crazy side, but after 30 years of playing, you kind of know certain things, right? You're used to feeling certain things. So very quickly, I just want to So hopefully that translated well. I'm not going to cut it out of the video if it didn't, but there's just a little more balance on the low end on the SG Special USA, whereas there's a little more, it's kind of more equally balanced between resonance and presence on the custom. And feel-wise, in comparison to the Gibson USA, like I don't want to keep talking about feel between the USA and this one, but it feels like it's one piece of wood in comparison to the USA. It's really weird. It just seems like you feel a little more of the vibrancy when you're playing, which there's things to be said. You know, as I've heard when I was younger, hot hide glue crystallizes when it so like the neck joint and the fretboard, what have you, it sort of just crystallizes and it fuses the wood together. I'm no glue-matician or anything like that, but all of my Gibson custom shop reissues use hot hide glue, and they all feel like that in comparison to their Gibson USA counterparts. And the pickups here are just very, 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 very reactive. The Black Beauty capacitors, I can't. I've never owned a vintage Gibson, so it's really hard to compare. I've tracked down capacitors in the past and have used them, and there's some that I haven't used because I didn't feel the need for it. But these pickups here, with the combination of the capacitors that are in here, just means they're very reactive when you're dialing back on your tone. I just find there's that extra like 10 or 20% when it comes to the tones that you can dial in here on these pickups. The 1956 as well, even though those aren't Black Beauty capacitors. It just to me it just makes it just all that much sweeter to be able to use it, and kind of pulls me down further rabbit holes with, you know, tone chasing, which we all do and is rather annoying but fun in the process. One other quick note here, because we have a nylon nut rather than like Graphtec or what have you, there are people that do get a little on the concern side. I know there's a history of people replacing the nut because they weren't as confident in the nylon. These aren't stocking nylon, this is hard nylon. I haven't noticed any like odd tuning issues when using nylon nuts. So right now I have 8 custom shop reissues. They all have the nylon nut My 1964 SG Standard with the Maestro actually has nylon saddles, and you know, I don't see any like tuning stability issues. When it comes to, like, you know, if I only had like one or two guitars that had the nylon, I could say, oh, they're anomalies. But just from my experience, all 8 of the guitars that I have the nylon nuts on them, that they seem perfectly fine. But I could just have 8 anomalies, I guess. And the 3-on-a-plate tuners here, for some reason, some people get a little worried when it comes to non-locking tuners. That's something that I don't think I've ever been like worried. But like the string change process when it comes to locking tuners is a lot more convenient. It's a lot quicker as well. The fact that, you know, when it's locking tuners, there's less wraps around the post, so that means there's less slack than can actually go around the post. But I've found over the years that locking tuners actually give off this weird vibrancy when you're playing, and it sort of makes the strings come across, again, I'm crazy, as just a little more dull. And that's something that I've much preferred. Going back to non-locking tuners, and the 3-on-a-plate here, they're fantastic. They're great. There's no, like, you know what I mean, like when you're turning them, you don't have to like turn it, do like a quarter turn before it starts to grab or anything like that. They're very nice, and the 3-on-a-plate it warms my inner guitar nerd's heart. And it's an SG. We've got just fantastic upper fret access. It does, like, in comparison to a Les Paul, you are going to note that the neck is just pushed forward ever so slightly. So just to show you here, like if I'm going to the 22nd fret on a Les Paul, it's here, and on an SG it's here. It's something that a lot of people don't really pay attention to. Going from a Les Paul to an SG, most of us are just happy to do that, but it is something that may throw you off for a little bit. But that's really all I do want to say about the guitar. I'm just extremely happy and very, very fortunate to own it. I guess I don't need to hunt down a 1962 with an ebony block, but like I wouldn't turn one down. But they're $10,000, and I've got 2 other $10,000 guitars that I want to buy beforehand. So I don't think I ever thought I would actually use those words. I gotta go brush my teeth.